All right, it's about 10:05. It's probably a good time to start. We'll have some people rolling in probably. So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out this morning on a super cold day, but that's par for the course around here. Welcome to Capturing Great Digital Photography. So I'm Conor McArdle. I work for a team called MIT Project Manus. So this was started in probably 2015, 2016 under Professor Marty Culpepper of mechanical engineering. And there was basically an issue with students gaining access to all the makerspaces on campus. So we have 30, 40 makerspaces, but some of them are sort of siloed in different schools. So we created Metropolis Makerspace, the Deep Makerspace, and the freshman training program Maker Lodge to open these spaces up. So we elevate making across campus, and we're now a part of the MIT Morningside Academy for Design, which is a new group that provides spaces, equipment, training, and project ideas, fostering maker communities and design across campus. We're both going to be located in the new Metropolitan Storage Warehouse when it opens by around 2025, that big brick castle building on the corner of Mass Ave and Vassar Street. So that'll be really exciting. So just as a background on this course, we have a few programs, this IAP sort of based around portfolio making. So our group has been working with CAPD, which is Career Advising and Professional Development at MIT. We have a new website up. There's the link here at the bottom. And basically, we just took a lot of resources available to all of us in terms of Adobe Creative Suite, Adobe Portfolio, different, GitHub, different available options for creating a portfolio and advice on doing that. And this course was built out of that. So basically helping students and staff with their capturing of photography and video for their portfolios. So I love this quote to start from Ansel Adams, a really famous landscape photographer and conservationist. You don't take a photograph, you make it. Okay, so we're going to look at some strategies, some best practices on sort of taking your photography to the next level and going from just a snapshot to sort of a planned photo. Okay, in terms of some course goals, I'm hoping that you'll leave this course with some best practices in lighting, stabilization, framing, and composition, a basic understanding of Adobe Photoshop. So Photoshop, who here has used Photoshop? Okay, awesome. So can be, super easy and also super complex. It's an amazing piece of software, a leader in the field, and we'll just get a real basic understanding of that today. And hopefully by the end of the course, we'll have taken a few photographs with our phone or our cameras using our light boxes and light table, edited them a bit with Photoshop, and away we go with some nice photos and then the understanding to be able to do it on your own in the future. So back to the discussion of portfolios. Why would we want a portfolio? So basically, people are doing amazing things at MIT all the time, from projects to personal work to coursework, and we want to make sure that all of this stuff is captured. It's great for documenting what you've created. It helps you stand out to employers and future schools if you're going for your grad degree or PhD. And it's especially important in the field sort of I'm in with makerspaces and maker projects, because it's awesome, tangible stuff that's perfect for documenting with photography and video. Sometimes when we're talking about sort of coding projects or writing projects, it's a little more obscure in terms of how you would document that with photography, but for maker projects or tangible things, this is a great avenue. So strong portfolios show rather than tell. We can write out our CV, our resume. That's a lot of telling, that's a lot of writing. Portfolios add sort of the visual aid to that, the proof to the cool things you've made. Okay, and basically in today's mobile-first world, this is easier than ever. Most of us have smartphones with amazing cameras right in our pocket. How can we best use that to improve our portfolios? So in terms of photography, when we're talking about photography, we're talking about various types of photography, okay? We've all heard of portrait photography, landscape photography, street photography, etc. There's different sort of styles of photography, and today we'll be talking about still life or object photography. Okay, this is a 3D printed Grogu from The Mandalorian on the right. So, still life for object photography. This means sort of focusing on capturing inanimate objects arranged in a visually appealing way, often emphasizing composition and lighting. So as I said, most of the makers in our makerspaces are documenting their 3D printed parts, their woodworking, their welded pieces, their glass pieces, and sort of still life in object photography is the perfect genre for that. So what constitutes a great photo in the context of object photography? So for me, a photo that is in focus, exposed properly, appropriately lit, of an appropriate resolution, color balanced, intentionally composed, and stabilized. Also cropped. So, in terms of photography, the term focus refers to the clarity and sharpness of an image. A focused image is sharp and not blurry. We've probably heard those words. Sharp focus on the subject makes a photo more intelligible and helps your eye sort of wander to the most important part of the photo. Has anyone heard of the concept of shallow depth of field or deep focus? These are sort of, speaking about how much of the photo is in focus, right? A shallow depth of field will be a small portion focused and then a blurry background. A deep focus will have everything sharp. So this photo of an object, I took it home. How would you describe the focus in this photo? Out of focus. Exactly, blurry. I would consider that not a great photo. Okay, exposure in photography refers to the amount of light that reaches the camera sensor or film during the process of taking a photograph. So I'm mostly talking about digital photography, but obviously with film cameras, this is a chemical process onto film. I'm talking about a digital capture device here. Achieving the right exposure is crucial for creating well-balanced and properly lit images. When we're talking about exposure in a photo, we're talking in terms of highlights and shadows. Okay, so we've got two photos here. How would you describe the top? Too dark, too shadowy, right? How about the bottom? Way too light, overexposed, perfect. Barely even noticeable as a photo, but just a ton of light. So we're seeking a balance in between those for exposure. So this is a little more advanced in terms of cameras. Does everyone here have a smartphone today, or did anyone bring a real DSLR camera? Smartphones? Yeah, so that's all you need, basically. But these are just some more advanced concepts that if you were taking a more advanced photography course, you would talk about. So we talked about light reaching the sensor of your camera, right? Shutter speed or exposure time is the length of time the film is open to that light. Okay, so this is the iris, the opening of the camera, opening and closing, super fast or super slow. So shutter speed is the amount of time that light can hit the sensor. Aperture is the size of that opening as the iris opens, okay? The size of the camera as light is coming in to the sensor. The combination of shutter speed and aperture size will regulate the film or the image's sensor's degree of exposure to light. So we talked about shallow depth of field. That's created with a low f-stop number. So on a lens like a 1.2 or similar, and that's going to allow a very large amount of light and a very shallow depth of field. But this is sort of advanced stuff. So with long exposure, aka slow shutter speed, so I can set my camera, I have a DSLR Canon, I could say 20 seconds, 30 seconds of light. That's going to let in enough light that you could see a bus in London drive past and capture that sort of light trail, right? In terms of a shallow depth of field, this would be with the very low f-stop number. It creates that depth of field. You see how we have in focus and then blurry. So if anyone has an Apple, who has Apple here versus Android? Okay, helpful. Both do a great job, but just in terms of Apple, they call this portrait mode now, right? So portrait mode mimics shallow depth of field using the camera. Okay, just some more helpful charts from visualeducation.com. Shutter speed. So I talked about the long shutter speed versus the short. So we can go all the way down to 1/1000th of a second. So that's how you're going to get super action, people diving through the air, soccer photos, sports photos, versus 1 second, 10 second, 30 seconds for long exposures, intentional blur of your photos. And as I mentioned, more light with more time, less light with less time, right? So the shutter is opening very quickly, or a super long exposure. So from left to right, do you think the one on the left is a long exposure or a short exposure? Long, yep. A long shutter speed, because it's taking that time to let everything sort of capture, and you're seeing that motion blur, versus catching the exact moment in time. Hello? Okay, back to the shallow depth of field. I talked about the f-stop, which is the size of the opening of the camera lens. 1.6 is considered a very open f-stop. f16 is a very small f-stop. So you can see the difference in terms of the depth of field, right? We have the focus, the sharp portion of the photograph, and then the out of focus, the blurry portion, because this is the shallow depth of field. The field in which it is focused is just this little bit right here, versus the deep focus on the right captures the whole scene. So, like I said, portrait mode versus deep focus. If anyone's seen Citizen Kane or some older Hollywood films, Orson Welles used deep focus, and you can see deep into the back of the frame, versus some artistic shots you see today with the shallow depth of field. Okay, so I just wanted to point out, I don't have a screenshot of the Android, but on your iPhone in portrait mode, if you click this little button here and pull down, it has the f-stop, right? We talked about f1.2, f16. That's the aperture, and right here you can choose the depth of field of your photo, which is pretty cool. So this is something in the newer iPhones. It's been around for a bit, but as you sort of pan left and right here in the middle, I'm at f2.8, so that's pretty open. I can go even farther down or all the way back. So you're creating that depth in portrait mode, which is pretty cool. And then on the right, this is me in a light box. I just screenshot. In portrait mode, there's also these cool studio light mode, natural light, contour light. It has all different sort of effects you can put in terms of the light. But like I said, up here you drop down, you've got more options. You can tell if you want to flash or not, etc. All right. So lighting, we're still talking about what constitutes a great photograph. So front light and back light refer to the direction from which the light falls on the subject in photography. We're aiming for even illumination, okay? Unless you're doing something really contrasty on purpose or silhouetted, even illumination is sort of how our eyes see things. So, as I said, has anyone heard the word silhouette? Okay, this is sort of the light coming from behind, backlighting. So, something like a light box has soft diffused light coming down from LEDs on the top, and this is flattering for most subjects. It helps to minimize the shadows, resulting in a more even and pleasing illumination. So these boxes, which we'll check out in a bit and each get a chance to play with, have a nice seamless white, green, or black background, even illumination on the tops, and light your subject pretty well. All right, so we talked about flash in terms of the iPhone. Direct flash can be pretty harsh and create unnatural shadows. So if you just throw some light on an object, you'll get all these shadows behind. So you can sort of bounce your flash onto the subject or use a more diffuse light capture like these light boxes. Okay, so as I said, silhouette, super lit from the back. And then this, I consider this a good photo. I mean, this is an object of me and my wife, who's here today in the back. And our new puppy, and we got this cool sort of 11-sided square object. And this was shot inside the light box, evenly lit, nicely illuminated. Okay, so in terms of technical quality, we can talk about resolution. So resolution in the context of cameras refers to the amount of detail that the camera can capture. And we usually talk about this in pixels, width and height, okay? So 1 megapixel equals 1 million pixels when you're creating the ratio of the width to the height. The better the camera, the higher the resolution, and the sharper your photos if taken properly. Okay, just a helpful graphic here, low resolution, low megapixel, up to higher resolution. Basically, just there's gonna be more quality to your photos, more detail for you to read. A lot of our cameras in our pockets are taking really high megapixels these days and creating great photos. So color balance. Color balance refers to the adjustment of colors in an image to achieve a neutral or accurate representation of the scene being photographed. White balance refers to the adjustment of the camera to ensure the white object appears truly white under different lighting conditions. So you have auto white balance in your cameras. You also have the ability to change the white balance to sort of adjust the spectrum of color based on that white. We can talk about cold and warm colors, and this refers to the color temperature of the light. Color temperature is a characteristic of visible light and is measured in kelvins or K. So you'll see like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 Kelvin on your camera. This is just talking about sort of warmer light, neutral white, cool white. So how would you describe these photos? How about the top photo? Cool, yeah, that's a cool bluish, right? And this will come up again in Photoshop when we're adjusting color temperature because there's a spectrum from cool to warm. In the bottom, obviously a warm, right? Orangey, yellowy. Okay, so composition. So we talked about making a photograph, right, versus just taking a photograph. Landscape and portrait orientations refer to the two primary ways a photograph or image can be framed. So landscape, right, portrait mode. There's something called the rule of thirds, which is cool. If you divide your frame into a 3x3 grid and position the main subject on sort of one of those key grid lines, this helps to create a balanced and visually interesting composition. So I'll just show you that. So here's some examples. They've placed the subject on one of these grid lines, right? It's like a bullseye. It's just a way to sort of help your photo instead of, you can always just take it dead on, but this is just sort of a strategy they call the rule of thirds, which breaks down your box into threes, right? And in terms of background with object photography and still photography, pay attention to the background. This is why a light box is helpful with that seamless background, because you're not having a very cluttered and busy background stuff in the back that's taking away focus from your photos. And for larger projects that obviously might not fit in a light box, but if you're building a bike, what if you've built a car or something, you could think about like a solid wall, a solid landscape or something without too much clutter to sort of emphasize your project. And stabilization, another helpful thing with your photograph. So photographing any subject requires a stable setup to avoid camera shake and ensure sharp images. If you're taking with your phone and you're shaking or moving, you're gonna notice that sort of jitter in the photo. With the iPhone and I think on some of the Androids, you can expose the photo either by clicking on the screen or sometimes with the up on the volume button. It's just a different way to sort of activate your camera. You can also invest in a quality tripod that can support the weight of your camera and lens, and this will help prevent vibrations and ensure stability. So we have a lot of stuff up here that we can play with, tripods, little desk tripods, various things, all under $30, $40, $50. I just wanted to give an example of some cheap objects that you can work into your workflow. Or you can place your camera on a stable surface like a table, rock, or wall to reduce vibrations and ensure the surface is steady and level. You can also brace yourself against a wall, using your chest, tuck your elbows and hold your camera close, and that'll help with that shakiness. If you're just going like this, that's when it's gonna be the most shaky. So some intentionally bad photos as I was moving the camera. So finally, cropping. Has anyone heard of cropping? Cool. So cropping refers to the process of removing unwanted parts of the image to improve composition, focus on the main subject, or change the aspect ratio. This is often done post-processing using photo software, okay, photo editing software. You can crop on your phones, you can crop in the frame as you're taking the photo, but you can also crop later in Photoshop or elsewhere. Shooting with the intention to crop later is a technique employed by photographers to capture a scene with a broader perspective and then refine the composition during the post-process stage. Okay, so just an example, I took it home, not the best, the background's too busy for me, but just wanted to give you a sense of, hey, I took this photo, I can crop later to sort of focus in on what I want. I don't need the water bottle, I don't need the Christmas decorations, etc. So that's cropping later. Okay, cool, so that was a quick run through of some theory behind photography. Any questions on any of that? Cool. So, what I want to do now is get some hands-on work for everyone. So as I mentioned, we have some light boxes. We've got a light table, which again has that seamless background, some ring lights, some tripods, etc. So basically, what I want you to do, and this is going to be easier, we don't have 22 people now, so it's going to be more helpful with less people, but just going to have you come down. Did anyone bring objects to photograph? Cool. And if you don't, you could use your watch, you could use your wallet, I mean something. It's just getting a sense of taking a photograph that we can then edit later. So you're going to come down, we can take our time, we've got some time, and we're going to plug these in. You can try shooting your object with various focal lengths. So on the iPhone, for example, some of these new iPhones have 3 different cameras, right? The 1X, 2X, 3X. You don't have to get too far into the box. You can use that natural optical zoom to focus on your object. So place your object in the center of the light box to ensure even lighting. You can try shooting down on the object or stay on the object's sort of eye level. Placing the object in the center of the frame and employing the rule of thirds is also possible if you wanted to get that sort of planned asymmetric look. You can also use the ring light. It's a little gloomy in here. We're going to try to open these up. If you shoot through the ring light, it helps you get even distribution of light on the subject if you want to try the light table here. Okay, and yeah, so let's take some photos. So everyone can come down, we'll take our time, we'll play with this, and then we'll move on to the editing and Photoshop portion of the class. So, has everyone emailed the photo to yourself or gotten it where you need it to be? All right, cool. So, great first half of the course. We are now into hour 2, and we should be wrapped up by noon for sure. So, the Adobe Creative Suite. Who here has used any Adobe products? Awesome. So, one of the great perks of working at MIT is we get access to the whole Creative Suite. So we have Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, Adobe InDesign for layout, Adobe Illustrator for vector graphics. Basically everything you would need for your creative pursuits can be achieved through Adobe. So this is Photoshop. So basically, I just want to talk about some basic features of the software here. That will help us take our photos to a more sort of polished final outcome. So we're going to talk about importing photos, working with a canvas on Photoshop, working with brightness and contrast, hue and saturation, cropping, clone stamp, burn, dodge, also content aware. I'll just mention briefly generative aware as well, but we probably won't get to that, and exporting. Okay, so I thought when I did this as a test class, I sort of started going through the details right off the bat, and people said it would be a little helpful if they could just sort of watch along for a second. So I'll just do a little run through first, and then we'll go through sort of what I was doing. Okay, so I had this little ship shot on a smaller seamless recently, and obviously, what's the first thing you notice, right? The cropping's horrible, right? You can see the edges of the box. Also, we have all this sort of gunk down here that I need to clean up, and sort of the shadows aren't perfect for me here. So you might have done a better job in the actual box. Your photo might be at a sort of higher level already, but I just wanted to give a sense of what we could do with Photoshop. So there's a couple of ways within Photoshop, and if you feel confident, you can follow through with your photo as well, but we'll go back on what these tools are actually doing. So I can File, Open, and I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to get my Ship Before. Okay, so this is opened up inside of Photoshop, and it can feel like a pretty daunting piece of software right when you start. I mean, there's a million different tools. I like to go to Window, Workspace, and I like Essentials Default. That has every tool I would need sort of right off the bat. It also has workspaces for 3D, motion design, painting, photography, graphic and web, or you can customize your own thing. So Photoshop is, primarily a sort of photo editing and manipulation software, but it can also be an awesome sort of drawing, painting software. There are sort of digital brushes of all shapes and sizes, all different colors and levels, and we work with layers. So think about you're working on your desk, right, and you have your canvas there. You're layering pieces on top of each other. You're layering that first stroke of black, that first stroke of white, of red, and you can think about different layers of your photo building up. So over here on the right, we have layers, and if I create a new layer on top of that background and say, okay, I'll take a brush and just do a big C for Conor, my name. Now, I haven't disrupted the bottom layer at all, right? Because it's a second layer. If I unchuck the eye, it disappears. So I can build layer upon layer, and everything is just adding. It's like I'm taking pieces of paper off that bottom layer. So just a handy thing to think about when we're thinking about layers, and think about it vertically. So there's the background layer, and it builds up. But for this case, I file and I open my photo, and we have my little 3D printed ship here. So going back to my list, I've imported it. Now I want to work on brightness and contrast. So right here, when I look at this, it looks a little sort of dark for me. There's a little shadow under here that I'd like to fix. A lot of the photo adjustment tools are under Image in the top toolbar, Adjustments, and these are a ton of really helpful tools. Brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, hue, saturation, etc., black and white. So for me, I'm going to go to brightness and contrast, and always make sure you have the preview bar checked. Because if I don't have the preview bar, none of the changes I do are going to make any difference, right? Not visually to me. So I hit preview, and if I take this brightness spectrum, increasing the brightness to the right, you're going to see it's adding more light. Going to the left is taking away brightness. So for me, I'm just eyeing that. I want to get that sort of background white to feel more white to me. I've increased that. Now, contrast is the difference between tones of color. So more contrast is going to make that black to white really contrasted, really sharp. Less contrast is going to be more of a melded together. So I'm going to bring that around maybe 5 for me. I feel okay with that. So once you hit OK, you're committing to that change. If you don't like it, you can always go to Edit, Undo, but that's how you would have committed to that. So hue, saturation. So image, adjustments, hue, saturation. It's not going to be that interesting because this is already a gray, dark blue, gray piece here. But if you had a lot of color in your photo, you can make a lot of changes. So let me just show you that. Let's just say, like, I'm going to get a random dog. So I paste that in there. So I just wanted to show you what hue and saturation can do. So basically what that does is just going to alter the entire color center of the photo, right? You're going to take those greens, it's going to turn to purples, etc. You can also do a cool thing. You can say, I was just adjusting the master colors, but if I said, I just want to adjust the greens, I hit master, and we've got R, Y, G, you know, the color spectrum. I hit green, and I adjust the green hue, and look, just the background's changing, which is really cool. So we're not doing a class on dogs. I was just showing you that. That can come in here, and I'm going to increase the saturation. I'm going to mess with the hue here, and this is another way to work on white balance like we talked about. See, if the hue is too far to the left here, we have a pink white, we have a blue white. I'm trying to get that white where I want it there. I can add more color, etc. You can also take the color all the way down and have a black and white photo, but I'm going to go sort of about here. It might be more interesting for some of your projects that have a little more color to start with. Okay, cropping. So we can do two things here. The easy thing would be to hit on the crop tool here on the left. And what that does is it's opened up these sort of, you know, panels around your object that you can pull and crop down to resize the canvas. I hit escape to get out of that. Up here on the top left, we talked about resolution and aspect ratio, which is the ratio of the height to the width. This has some built-in ratios here. Square, as we talked about, 10 by 9, 5 by 7, has some common sort of 4 by 5s, 8.5 by 11s. That's the size of like a piece of paper. You can also do your own ratio or your specific resolution. For me, that's not really, I don't need an exact resolution. So I can just pull these edges, and I'm getting rid of that nasty part I don't like, right? Now, what do we have here? We have a grid. We could play with the rule of thirds, as we talked about, right? Or we could just go center, hit, enter, okay, we've cropped it. Now, that's the easy way. So say I really wanted the dimensions of this photo, but I have these things on the left and right, which are getting in the way, okay? But I need it to be this size for a website or something. So what I can do is a couple things. First of all, I'll show you the clone stamp tool. Now there's this little stamp, like a rubber stamp, one of those old rubber stamps. If you click on that, and you'll see this circle, this is the size of the stamp right now. If I go to the top left, I can increase the size, let's say 400 pixels wide. Now, this is an interesting thing here. So basically what you're doing is imagine you have a stamp, and you take a piece of the photo over here, and you're going to paint it over here, right? So I take my stamp, I hold Option, and you see that little target has happened. If while holding Option, I click and paint while holding Option, and I let go of Option, when I paint over here, it's taking the color from where I took it from. Do you see that? Which is really cool. So basically, I'm saying, I like this white, I like this shade, and I'm resampling every time and taking that away. So boom, it looks like it's been seamless the whole time. Okay, and stuff like down here, you have to get a little fancier. So say, I don't know if you can see sort of a line between the bottom and the wall here. What I like to do is sample that sort of area, hold Shift and drag, and it's going to make a nice smooth line there. So that's clone stamp, and I could do that with anything. I could say, oh, I want this chimney over here, right? Or I want this boat over here. So just taking a piece and sampling that and cloning it over there. Now the other super cool thing is called Content Aware Delete. So if I take the marquee tool, so basically, conceptually, everything I'm doing in Photoshop, I need to select something and then do something to it, right? So I can do that with the marquee. You're going to click and drag and you have something. Then I could go to the move tool and I could just move that portion, right? Or I could do lasso, which is down here. That's like a lasso, cowboys lassoing a cow. And that allows me to draw specific areas I want to cut out. Or say I wanted this area And you know what? I just want to make that area a different color. So it's all about choosing an area and then manipulating that area. So there's 3 different types of lassos. There's lasso, free form lasso. And I'm just Control-Zing to undo. There's polygonal lasso, which does rigid shapes. And then the coolest is magnetic lasso. And what that does is it connects to where there's contrast between 2 colors. So watch. I can just click on that and drag my mouse down, and it's sensing where that line is. And it's allowing me to cut out the shape very easily without having to do that totally freeform. That's called magnetic lasso. It's like using a magnet on the color. So that was just a quick sort of side avenue into marquee and selection. But say if I go to the normal marquee, and what's my goal here on the left? What am I trying to do here? I want to cut that out, right? But I don't want to use the clone stamp. I'm just showing you different ways. If I click the marquee, click and drag, so it's now selected just that area, right? And I do edit, let's see, content aware fill. And what it did is it sensed the area around there and did it for me. See that? So basically the computer is saying, okay, what is around this area and how can I use my awareness of the content to fix that? Or I can select it and hit Shift Delete. And instead of deleting, I can delete the black. I don't really want that. I can delete the white. I don't really want that. But if I delete the content aware, it's going to delete it and fill that space with the clean background, which is super cool. Okay, so we talked about clone stamp, burn and dodge. So down here we've got a little fist, burn, and a little sort of lollipop thing, dodge. So this goes back to old sort of dark rooms with film photography when you're brightening a portion of the area of the photograph, darkening a portion. So the dodge tool, again, I can choose the size. The dodge tool allows me to take areas and brighten it. So if I just want the little captain's quarters to be brighter, right? Or I just want, I really want the whole of the ship to be darker. So I'm going to burn that area, right? Or you can burn and get more shadow down here, right? So those are just an interesting couple of tools there. Okay, we've talked about content aware, generative AI. So this is brand new in Photoshop, but it's pretty wild. So everyone's heard of AI, right? ChatGPT. Has anyone heard of DALL-E? You can use AI to create new images for you. So Photoshop now has that built in. I just created a marquee where I wanted it, and what popped up? Generative fill. And if I say a vast blue ocean real life photo, hit enter. In theory, it might put waves underneath the ship, which has nothing to do with what we're trying to do here with your projects, but it's just kind of cool. Takes a little bit depending on your, okay, interesting. It gives me different options to go through. This is kind of cool. Isn't that pretty wild? Or say, a fisherman standing on his boat, cartoon. So some people hate this, it's sort of ruining art, so I sort of potentially agree with that, but it's also really fun. Okay, that was horrible. Here we go. So I'm not sure what this guy's supposed to be, but he is, yeah, I guess, yeah, he's a fish man, right? So the AI doesn't really understand how to do that. So get rid of all that. I just wanted to show you that's kind of a fun thing. Okay, so before I burned and dodged my boat, I liked it pretty good. Down here, again, with the clone stamp, I'm going to say, you know, I really don't like these little scratches. So I'm going to take some clean canvas, I'm going to paint those out. So you can do this if you have pimples on your face you don't want in a photo. You just take the clean skin and paint over it, right? Like you can do it with a million different applications. Or too much shadow, I'm going to take here, I'm going to paint in. Now you have to be careful about not painting in over the ship, right? But you can also do something, so say we go back to the lasso. I could zoom in, Command plus, and I say, I want to paint out the shadow, but I don't want to mess with the boat. So what I do is I create an area around the boat, and I say, I only want this area messed with, right? So now when I clone stamp, and I option and I paint, it's only going to paint up to that line and not going to paint anywhere beyond that line. So it looks a little ragged, but it's kind of cool. So say I like this. I'm going to go finally again to the crop tool. I'm going to crop it down. I like how it looks. What do you do with it now? You can either save it, and you can save it as a Photoshop file. So Photoshop file will always let you open it back up and re-edit it and rework with it, save your layers, save everything. But if you want to put it on Instagram, Facebook, on your website, etc., you're going to go to Export As. And then here you've got your classic PNG, JPEG. I always like to have the best quality. You can give your image dimensions you want, export it. I'm just going to say new.jpg, open, desktop, right there. So now we have a workable file we can share, do anything with. Okay, so that was definitely, did that make sense or was that too quick? What do we think? Makes sense? All right, so if we want to do it together now and go a little slower, let's open your folder onto Photoshop. Is everyone there? Yep. And I'll share these slides with everyone and I can share the video as well. And then remember the image adjustments, brightness, contrast. So in Photoshop, brightness and contrast are image adjustment settings that allow you to control the overall luminance or tonal range of the image. Brightness, the top spectrum, adjusts the overall lightness or darkness of an image, and contrast controls the difference in brightness between the light and dark parts. So remember that was image adjustments, brightness, contrast. So you're just trying to, brighten certain areas, make it look as good as it can be, getting rid of some of those dark areas. And I'll show you something that wasn't on the slide and I forgot to show you. Image adjustments, and this goes back to, I forget your name, but you were working on the little castle thing. Image adjustments, shadow highlights. This is really cool. So see all those shadows that were on my boat? I can say, I want a little shadow or I want no shadow at all. So it's basically sensing what shadow and brightening that up. Or also what's highlighted and taking that down. So that looks not great because there's too many highlights in that photo, right? But shadow highlight is really handy. So has everyone gotten their contrast and brightness to where you like it? Cool. All right. Hue saturation, we talked about. Image adjustments, hue saturation. You can change the whole tonal spectrum there. You can adjust certain colors. You can play around with that. It's always fun just to slide the hue around and see what you can make. All right. Now, what about clone stamp? We talked about clone stamp, right? Well, first of all, let me just talk about what hue and all that means. So hue saturation is a feature of Photoshop that allows users to adjust the colors in an image. Think back to our discussion of color balance, right? The cool colors, the warm colors. You can adjust that after the fact in Photoshop with this. So hue refers to the type of color in the image, such as red, blue, green, etc. And the hue saturation tool allows you to shift that spectrum. Saturation refers to the intensity of the color, a really saturated red, a really saturated yellow, versus a sort of dull color, right? And lightness controls the brightness or darkness of the image, just another way of doing that outside of brightness contrast. It makes the colors appear lighter or darker without changing the hue. Does everyone feel good on that? All right, now one of my favorites, as I showed, clone stamp. Burn and dodge. So these tools are part of Photoshop's arsenal for retouching and enhancing images, offering users precise control over various aspects of their compositions. So the clone tool, as I showed, is used for duplicating or cloning one part of the image and applying it to the other, right? So you're cloning that area and dropping it on a new area. It allows you to copy pixels from one part of an image and bring it over. The burn tool is one of the tools that is used for darkening areas, increasing the exposure or decreasing the exposure. The dodge tool is the counterpart to the burn tool. Instead of darkening areas, it makes areas brighter. So again, I'll go back here. I'll say, okay, I don't like that shadow. It's the little clone on the left-hand side. I click the clone. I go to the top left and I choose the size or the hardness of my brush. I'm going to say 200 pixels. And then the most important part, holding Option. And when you hit Option, your circle becomes a target. And once you have that target activated, you click in Paint, and then you let go, and you click in Paint, and you're cloning that area over. So say there's shadow. I'm going to take that white. I'm going to clone it. I'm going to let go. I'm going to paint it. So this is how you get rid of imperfections. You clone an area. Yep. So hit clone and then top left. Do you see up here? Yep, that 200 or it might be 100. So it's a similar brush to sort of the paintbrush. You can have a circle paintbrush, or you can have, all different hardness or softness. A hard brush has a nice contrasted edge. A soft brush has a soft edge. It's the same with the clone stamp. Different ways of doing that. Okay. We talked about content aware. That was that magical sort of fill. In Photoshop, this refers to a set of intelligent tools and features designed to automatically analyze and fill in the missing or selected parts of an image with content that seamlessly blends with the surrounding areas. So I think it's super cool. It just makes things really easy. So say okay, obviously you wouldn't be manipulating that much on a thing you made because you're trying to show the cool thing you made, but say I didn't like the seams here. I could try Command Delete. Well, that didn't work. Shift Delete, Content Aware, and see it smoothed that up. Okay, so it's taking what's around there and fixing it. Sometimes it doesn't always work. So then you have to come in and say, you know what, actually, I'm just going to clone this area with a little smaller brush. Oh. Sorry, just froze. Take that, clone that, and I'm painting with the clone stamp. Cool. And then we talked about the cropping, okay? That was that crop tool. On the left-hand side, it looks like two sort of rulers coming together. Right here on the left, usually the fifth one down, right there, and that is the crop tool where you can navigate which area you want to crop. You can change the aspect ratio. You can make it from horizontal to portrait mode, etc. And always hit enter. Okay, and then after that, we did talk about the generative AI, but I left that off here because it's sort of a little out of bounds there, but definitely play with. You can make some really fun stuff. And then the exporting. We talked about file export to JPEG. Joint Photographic Experts Group is a widely used format for photographs and images with gradients. PNG, PNG, portable network graphics, is commonly used for images on the web. Logos and images requiring a transparent background. So that's the most important thing for me. So say I'm doing a website, right? And I make a cool logo. On Photoshop, it might look like there's white in the background, and if I did a JPEG, there would be white in the background. And say I needed my MIT logo, but there's a bunch of white, and I'm putting that over a photo, it's not gonna look great. With a PNG, you can have a transparent background. So just the art is there, and the background's transparent. So when you put it over another photo, it's just the logo. So there's different sort of formats for different use cases. In PDF, we all had PDFs, written PDFs. It's a versatile format used for documents with text, images, vector graphics as well. It's easy to maintain a consistent layout. It can be really scalable and still maintain the quality. Okay, storage and sharing. And if people have questions, I'll come around after this and help you with Photoshop questions or bring them down. So what do you do once you have the photos, right? Do anything you want with them. You can email them to people, put them on Dropbox, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, share your portfolio. But for our purposes, I suggest you check out the CAPD website. And we've got a new section on portfolios. Okay, this is Project Manus, where I'm from, Morningside Academy. And, this is a portfolio workshop in theory. There's also tools to build your portfolio. Adobe Creative Cloud, Cargo, which is a really cool portfolio making software that MIT pays for as well. GitHub Pages, if you're more of a coder. Check out these places. Also, the communication labs of Meki and Aero Astro, they have people on staff and graduate student mentors that can help you with your writing and help you with your portfolios and all sorts of stuff. So check that out. But on an additional note to that, Chris, who was here earlier helping out with Jennifer, he is hosting an MIT portfolio office hours each week of IAP. So check that out. Room 35, 238, and on Zoom. The information can be found on design.mit.edu, which is the Morningside Academy for Design website under events. And he'll just be there to help you out with Adobe Portfolio, which is part of the Creative Cloud, but Adobe's portfolio solution. So it interfaces really well with Photoshop and everything. Cargo, sorry, that should be Cargo, not Canvas, and GitHub. Okay, just a quick plug for Makerspaces at MIT. So you might not know this, but like I said, there's 30, 40 spaces on campus. They're not all accessible to you, but Project Manus's and Morningside Academies at N52, building N52, also the Deep in building 37072 in the basement, in Metropolis 6C 006B, which is the basement. These are spaces open to the entire community. You get orientated, you get trained on safety, 3D printers, laser cutters, drill presses, saws, welding, everything you want. These are just great places where you can make cool stuff that you can then photograph. So this is a cool maker map that came out of the MIT Spectrum magazine. Just showing miters, which is an awesome student-led makerspace, the Deep, which we run, a bio makerspace, which is sort of a biology-based making. The Martin Trust Center ProtoWorks, I think that is possibly closing, so this is a little outdated. The Edgerton Center, student shop. Edgerton Center is a pioneer of making and makerspaces on campus. The Hobby Shop, which is MIT's oldest makerspace, over 100 years old, focuses on woodworking. Check them all out. Super cool spaces. So, any questions? And like I said, I'll be around. If you have any questions on Photoshop specific stuff, you can come back and use Goxes. But in terms of like the lecture portion of the class, that's it. So thanks a lot. Yeah.